Section C. Got to answer two questions here. Everyone's going to answer question 3, and then depending on what schools have taught their pupils, you've either got to answer question 4, 5, or 6. So first of all, let's start with question 3. I've got figure 8 and 9. Figure 8 is a diagram which shows you how fracking works. You've got a bit of a diagram and some text, and then figure 9 are areas around the UK where the orangey brown is the areas where licenses have been given, and the sort of dark green is areas where they are thinking about giving licenses to frack. Right, for the first question, 3.1 suggests one reason for the development of fracking in the UK. Basically, why are we doing it? Lots of potential answers. That, for instance, you could have the fact that recently we have found lots and lots of this shale gas. So that's a great sort of natural resource for us. You could also argue that obviously other places where the UK gets its energy from, for instance, oil from the North Sea, is starting to run out. Now, it's the idea that if you can get your own source of energy, it gives you what's called energy security. So you don't have to get it in from other places, because if you do that, if you are having to buy energy from other European countries or from countries in the Middle East, it's going to cost you a lot more. So fracking in our country will boost our energy security. Also, you could say that things like wind turbines and solar panels don't really, at this moment in time, do enough. Insufficient to meet our demands. So any one of those potential answers will be fine for 3.1. 3.2, using figure 9, describe the distribution of areas where the existing licenses for fracking in the UK. So this word is used a lot, distribution. It's just basically describe where the areas are. Now for 2 marks, you've got to have a look at the figure. You've got to describe the pattern for 1 mark, and then as long as you use place names, that should be your second point. So what do you have on figure 9 to help you? Well, more often than not, when you've got a map, you'll have the compass points. So that indicates that potentially you can use north, east, south, west in your answer. You've also obviously got lots of cities here, so we probably need to use some of those in our answer. You've also got a scale as well. So to sort of ensure that you get full marks on what is quite a relatively easy question, first of all, you've got to have a look at the orangey brown areas, and you've just got to describe where these areas are. So you could say, using compass points, that a lot of these areas are in sort of the east of England, particularly between Kingston upon Hull and Nottingham. Or maybe you want to use the scale, you could say there is an area of around about 100 kilometres just south of London. Or you could even be more general, you can say there is a spread of these areas all around the UK. 3.3, with the help of figures 8 and 9, explain why the process of fracking for gas causes conflict between different groups of people. So the main focus of this question is sort of environmental impacts on one side and the economic impacts on another. So if we look at the figures, underneath the diagram, we've got what fracking is, and it suggests some of the negatives and also some of the positives. So this will be our starting point. We then just need to develop the points further. So for instance, maybe let's start with the negatives. Fracking needs a lot of water. Loads of water has to be transported to the site, because that, among other things like chemicals and sand, is what is piped down under high pressure to basically crack the rock open. So you can develop that point and say, obviously, water is a very valuable resource. Some environmental groups won't want that to be wasted. Once the gas is So once the rock is cracked open, some of that natural gas can maybe seep into underground water supplies, also called aquifers. And as we've seen from the video we watched in class, in some parts of Australia, this has happened so much that a lot of people are turning their taps on, and because of all the gas that has escaped from the rock going into the water, you can set it actually on fire. Also, it can contribute to earthquakes as well. We've seen a couple of examples of that up in Blackpool. Only small ones, 2.5 on the Richter scale. But potentially, if we continue this, it might get bigger and bigger. So you need to discuss on one hand, but on the other hand, why are we doing this in the first place? Well, to get natural gas to use as a fossil fuel to burn, compared to coal and oil, it does give off emissions, but nowhere near as much. Not only that, but obviously, as mentioned, if we can get so much of this, and looking at this map, it seems like there is a lot of shale gas at our disposal. The more we have, you could argue, the better financially, because you are not getting in energy from parts of the world which might be tricky. For instance, natural gas from Russia or oil from Middle Eastern countries like Iran. So as long as there is some balance in your answer, with the pros and the cons, you should be hitting 5 or 6 out of 6. In figure 10, we've got 2 graphs. First one is Dartmoor, and it just shows you the months of the year and then the amount of rainfall that this place gets. We've got the same graph this time for London, and then we've got a map of where these two places are in relation to each other. So 3.4, you've got to use that figure and complete the graph for Dartmoor using the data. December rainfall is 210 millimetres. So what you've got to do, you can see this bar in December is not yet filled in. We've got to shade in past 200 and a little bit more. Easy mark. Next question, 3.5, sorry. State the difference in rainfall between Dartmoor and London in January. I've got to sewed one of these circles incorrectly. So, if we look at London, that's how much rainfall there is in January, just below 50. In Dartmoor, in January, it's obviously a lot more. So you'll work out the difference, and the answer is A, 140. 3.6, using figures 11 and 12 suggests while there might be a need for water transfer from one part of the UK to another. As the name suggests, water transfer is just moving water from one place to another. So we've got to use the figures as the question suggests. So if I scroll up, we've got 2 choropleth maps. These are basically maps where information has been mapped on by using a scale of different colours. So what we can see from the first one, this shows us basically where it rains in the UK. So we could say that if we use this map, the areas of water surplus, so that's the key term, water surplus is where you have more water than perhaps you need, will be mainly in the north of the UK. So in places like Scotland, north, west of England, and Wales as well. Now, if we contrast that with where the major cities are, and obviously the more people there are in an area, the greater the need there is for water. A lot of these areas are located either to the south, so the biggest city is obviously London, or major cities centrally or to the east of England. So these are going to be areas that are going to suffer from what's called water deficit. It looks like, based on the map above, these areas they don't really get enough water, particularly down in London, as you can see here, to sustain them. So all you need to do is use the place names, understand the colours, use some of the numbers for the keys, and explain. As mentioned, in the north and in the west, there's lots of water, but where the need of it is around those big cities in the south and to the east. Okay, so after question 3, you'll notice again there are instructions where it says you've got to answer either question 4, food, question 5 on water, question 6, energy. And what you're going to have to do here is you're going to have to shade in the question that you do. So, just to be clear, we are doing question 5, which is water. So you'll put a dash in that circle there, and then you will leave these questions out. Don't do any of question 4. So, we're now going to question 5. This is our water section. You've got a map of Africa, and it sort of shows you how much water is available per person in Africa in 2010. You've got all different colours, again, another choropleth map to represent the information in the key. So 5.1, it's a multiple choice question. What was the total amount of water per person in Ethiopia in 2010? This question could not be easier. All you've got to do is find Ethiopia on the map, which is this one here. You've then got to use the colour, look at the key, and then the correct answer is B. So just shade that one in. Next question, 5.2. Using that figure again, describe, again, this key term comes up all the time, the distribution of countries in Africa where there was less than 1,000 cubic meters of water per person per year in 2010. So basically, you've just got to describe where these countries are. So for 2 marks, obviously just one basic statement will not be good enough. Try not to lose marks on these questions because they will add up eventually. So the ones that are less than 1,000 are the ones in bright orange. So for instance, you could say the vast majority of these countries are found in the extreme sort of north, such as Egypt, Algeria, Libya, and the extreme south in South Africa. You might say, and be a bit more specific, you can just add up the number of countries, particularly in the north, and you can say there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 countries in the north of Africa that have less than 1,000 meters cubed per person per year. So as long as you pick out a couple of points, use the place names. A good thing to do would maybe to also count up the amount of countries just to add that level of complexity into your description. 5.3. Give 2 causes of water insecurity. Basically, this question is asking why do places not have a lot of water? So there's loads of different causes. These can be what's called physical causes. For instance, things like the climate. It might be too hot, so all the water on the surface is evaporated, or it might be really dry. You might have a lot of people in an area, and try and get key terms in if you can, like population growth or high population density. Obviously, the more people there are, the harder it is for the water to be spread evenly. It might be to do with the rock type in the area. If the rock, for instance, is porous or permeable, the water will go into the soil, go into the rocks. It might be very difficult to actually get that water because it's not on the surface. Or maybe there might be an increase in manufacturing, because a lot of water is used cooling down products to make things like steel or iron in factories. So lots of different reasons. Pick 2, state them briefly. That'll be your 2 marks. Final question 5.4. Explain how water security can be improved. Now notice that although this is the last question, it's not a 9-mark case study question. So for this part, section C, this is how you will finish. And to be honest with you, it's probably the easiest question that you could potentially be given. You don't have to analyse, you don't have to evaluate, you just simply have to explain methods to improve what's called water security. Now that is just basically where an area has enough water to sustain life or the people there. Now, a lot of parts of the world don't have water security. So this question is just getting you to explain how these areas can get more water or how they can stop wasting it. So lots of different methods. For instance, governments can introduce laws to restrict the amount of water people use in their homes, such as hosepipe bans that we've seen in this country in years gone by. You could maybe build things like a reservoir, so you basically put a big dam up and store water behind it in times of drought. Uh, Maybe you could look at farming techniques and methods. So the most common way to water crops is called irrigation, and all that simply means is by getting water to a field unnaturally, normally through lots of pipes. Now, the quickest way to put water on crops is to just simply spray them. Problem with that is it can be quite wasteful. A lot of spray might be evaporated off. So you've got something that's a bit more efficient called drip irrigation. Simply in small pipes, the water drips out to the base of the plant rather than spraying it. So again, if you use less water, you will become what's called more water secure. Or instead of your normal crops, and you plant crops that require less watering. These are called drought resistant. There's a few more methods as well. Again, going back to the home, maybe people can be told to have showers rather than baths, or if you're having showers, can you have shorter ones? Or potentially, can you reuse water? So this is the idea of what's called grey water. Now, some homes, from when they have water from the sink or the bath or the washing machine, once it goes down the plug hole, it is then stored in a tank in their house. It has to be used quite quickly because over time this water can start to smell. However, that water can be used again to maybe be sprayed on the garden or maybe wash a car, because you don't need perfect fresh water for those activities. And the more that you can recycle and reuse water, the more you'll have left over. Lastly, a very expensive idea, and only a few countries around the world have invested heavily in this. But if you have a coastline and you're near the sea, maybe you can have a big plant which basically takes away the salt from the seawater. So these are called desalination plants. A good idea, and potentially going to be more common in the future, but because it is so expensive to do right now, it's not used too often. If you explain the ideas that I've mentioned to good detail, again, you should be getting answers 4, 5, or 6 out of 6.